So this is a video I'm making to explain the sort of out there stance that I take that COVID-19 may not be a real thing. This is a specific video I'm making with to debate with a specific individual, but I will probably make it public. So here we go. We're specifically focusing on Allegheny County, Pennsylvania, right? So that's where Philadelphia is located. So fairly dense urban area. So this is the most recent data they have. They actually have a really nice sort of dashboard display here. So this latest data is, today is July the 16th, 2020. And so there are 5,558 confirmed cases and 201 deaths. So this is a number. There's also, you'll notice there's a probable, but I'm not going to worry about those because we'll just focus on what's actually confirmed. So for perspective, so 201 deaths, and you'll notice it's about a 4-month time frame so far. What are we looking at this deaths, right? So kind of from, March, what we got here, March 21st to, July 12th. It's about roughly 4 months. So we'll just call it 4 months for easy math later on. But here you'll see the cases by day. So starting right here, not so long ago on June 25th, you see just this massive, cases are just going crazy and wild. And meanwhile, deaths were, notice the scale here, right? Deaths per day, 0 to 10. And the cases, 0 to 400 is the scale up here. But here you see the death is pretty flat. Now, for perspective, 201 deaths, 5,550 confirmed cases. Let's see what we got on this page. Population of Allegheny County, I think this might be 2018 data, is 1,218,452, and the rate is death rate is 16.5 deaths per 100,000 people. That is what that number is. So there's some reference. Let's see, I got this page pulled up. What was interesting about it? There's some data on here, ethnicity, race data. But I wanted to point here, right? So it was let's go back real quick. Yeah, 201 deaths. And that was for Allegheny County. And these are actually state numbers for the state of Pennsylvania because I don't think I could find a breakdown. So the state deaths is just under 7,000 there, 6,000 and close to 900, 6,900. But a point I wanted to make is of these deaths, they do actually show things like age demographics, right? So you'll notice here, obviously, the majority of deaths are kind of in the 60 and over crowd, and especially here in the 75 and over crowd, pretty concentrated. You're looking at over half of the deaths about right there from the 75 to 94 crowd. And if you're just going to lump in the rest, half the deaths are 75 and over. Now, it's just a point of logic. We all know, it should be generally accepted that as we get older, we're getting closer to death. And the ravages of age and time, as it were, are going to make us more susceptible to death and disease. No question, right? Here we've got a little bar graph on the side too, just kind of shows it per age demographic. Not surprising, that's not surprising at all, right? That's probably pretty indicative of a lot of things in general about death as it relates to age. But down here, right, so specifically related to COVID-19 is that they have these comorbidities, right? Now it does say here, at the time of this reporting, approximately 37% of death records did not include comorbidity data, okay? So we'll look at down here in this nice breakdown, comorbidities in descending order. So, like I said, was it coming up on 68? I think it's 6,800 and change. We'll call it 6,900. You're hitting about half that number by the time you get down here to this kidney chronic, right? So, chronic kidney disease, coronary artery disease. What did I forget? What COPD? It's basically coronary something. It's respiratory disease, basically. I forget the exact acronym, meaning metabolic diseases, hypertension, and dementia. And that's probably just more a factor of it being an elderly demographic of the deaths. But basically saying that a large, percentage of the people who are classified as, oops, I just dropped something. Anyway, are ranked as COVID deaths have comorbidities. And as it said up here, right, 37% of death records do not include comorbidity data. Doesn't mean there wasn't any, but maybe there wasn't. We'll just assume there wasn't because it doesn't say. So moving along, what do we got over here? Also another nice bar graph here. Oh, gotta wait for it to load. Right, so just seeing over cases by date for Allegheny County. Right, and notice right here, and boom, just ramps right up. So we got all this ramp up in cases, but no corresponding ramp up in death. Whereas you see this sort of ramp up in death now, I mean, we got scales here, 0 to 8 per day, whereas we're looking at, 0 to, 200 plus as far as cases per day. Right. And that's kind of part of my argument is that for something that's supposed to be a threat and a pandemic, there just doesn't seem to be enough death for me personally, to think that this is a serious threat. Let's see, were there other interesting demographics you pull up here? We got age. This is just tests, like cases are actually, I have issues with the testing, but we'll get to that. We got here deaths. Just probably show again demographics. Yeah, 82%, 72 and older, 12% in the 60-69 bracket, and very few in the young. But this should be like my argument is that in general, these are the people most susceptible to any number of things that eventually result in death. I mean, 100% of us are going to die. It's an inescapable fact. And so again, 205 deaths for the county. This many people tested. Remember, there's over 1.2 million people in the county. We'll look at those numbers a little later. I just want to compare some flu data. So this is the flu data that they had, that the county, right, we're in the health department of Pennsylvania, right, their government page. And we see here, this is the 2019-2020 flu season, but it ran only to March 28th is where this data ends, right? And so for Allegheny County, there were 13,694. Now these would be confirmed flu cases. They're confirmed because they classify the influenza type. And the only way you would know the type is if you actually did an influenza test. So moving along, what do we got here? Yeah, Pennsylvania, Allegheny County. This was the 2018-19 season. Notice this runs for a whole year, September 18 to September 19, and a total of 9,856 cases of influenza for an entire year time span. Confirmed influenza, by the way, because they list the types. So those were confirmed influenza. They actually did an influenza test. And so going back, Allegheny County so far in this 4 months, we have 5,558 cases of COVID. But remember that here, here, 13,690. They stopped counting in March. This is actually a pretty significant flu year, I think, for Allegheny County, since for the whole year of 18 to 19, 9,856 cases. So so far, the 2019 to 2020 confirmed influenza, like they did an actual test and confirmed the presence of influenza virus, was significantly higher. 13,000 and change plus this 9,800 plus count. Now, for another reference, I want to point out that in 2016, Google search Allegheny County annual deaths. So 2016 data, 13,804 deaths. So I'm going to go over here to this spreadsheet. I'm going to pull up. Hopefully it'll load and not crash. All right. So kind of putting all this data to where we can actually kind of look at it. If it'll pull up. All right. So the population of Allegheny, 1.2 million plus, right? This was the actual number of tested folks they had, 86,000 plus. The number of positive tests, or what they classified as cases, 5,750 cases. And in 4 months, they've had 205 deaths. So of those tested, they've tested 7.1% of the total population of Allegheny County. And of those tested, they're 6.64% positive. That's kind of seems about average. My state of Tennessee, which has probably a lower population than the state of Pennsylvania, has run in the 5.2 up to 6.4% on average per month for testing. It's been pretty standard rate. So probably, I would think if you've looked at a lot of states, I don't know because I haven't looked at them, this would probably seem kind of consistent. So 205 deaths. So of the people that tested positive, 3.57% of them have died. So that doesn't seem like a super great number. I admit that. But I'll talk about that here in a second, elaborate. So, but doing a little bit of extrapolation, right? Potential death, right? So if 3.75% of those that tested positive died, right? And so far, of those that have tested positive, right, 6.64. So if we said that we had tested the entire state and applied the 6.64 number, right, I think that's what I did, yep. So you would expect 80,905 cases. Now this is extrapolation, but like I said, in my state, that's been pretty close. My state's actually lower. It's probably more like, I haven't checked it in a little while, but last time I checked it was like 5.2. But so not super different as far as percent. So now if you think of like, well, you applied the actual death rate to this potential extrapolated number, we'd get 2,880 deaths. Now, based on that extrapolated number, that would equate to 241 deaths per month, assuming these percentages held relatively constant. Now, the thing that isn't going to change in this is the population of Allegheny County. That's probably not going to, change by any significant number. It's a fixed number in this. But so far, over 4 months, 205 deaths, which equates to about 51 deaths per month. Now, based on that 2016 data, that was for 13,804 deaths in the year, which equates to 1,150 deaths per month in Allegheny County. Now, so far in 2020, we've got 51 deaths per month attributed to COVID. Now, to me, just looking at this as it stands, to assume that these are all good data and legit numbers, it doesn't seem like a super threat to me. It doesn't seem like a very significant threat. Now, I'll go on here a little bit and talk about the validity of what is called a COVID death. This is the CDC website, right? What was at the top of this page? Technical notes, provisional death counts for coronavirus, but I highlighted this portion down here. Why are pneumonia, influenza deaths included in this report? Pneumonia and influenza deaths are included to provide context for understanding the completeness of COVID-19 mortality data and related trends. deaths due to COVID-19 may be misclassified as pneumonia or influenza deaths in the absence of positive test results. And pneumonia or influenza may appear on death certificates as a comorbid condition. Additionally, COVID-19 symptoms can be similar to influenza-like illness. Thus, deaths may be misclassified as influenza. Thus, increases in pneumonia and influenza deaths may be an indicator of excess COVID-19 related mortality. Now, what they're saying is basically is that some of the deaths that are classified as pneumonia and influenza could have been COVID-19, but I would argue here that the reverse logic could also apply, that some of the COVID-19 deaths could have been just influenza and pneumonia deaths. It doesn't say that, but in my mind, from my perspective, that could totally be like, why cannot the reverse logic apply? And we'll see here that what classifies as a pneumonia, see what it see, may appear additionally, in the absence of positive test results. So not all deaths, and I'll show this here a little later in a second, that not all deaths that are classified as COVID deaths actually have a confirmed COVID test. See, I had this page pulled up just to show this is 2019-2020 flu season. That they showed that they stopped really tracking flu. This is week 14 of 2020, which corresponds to the first week of April. They just kind of just stopped tracking the flu, which we saw back here. No, here. No, where was it? I got it. Yeah, they stopped tracking flu in Pennsylvania at the end of March, or which corresponds pretty close to the 1st of April. Where is that? Okay, yeah. And here, when we read in the data of Pennsylvania, it actually directs you to this, that COVID, basically the state of Pennsylvania, how they're classifying their COVID death is in line with what the CDC guidelines are. Now here are the CDC guidelines for reporting COVID deaths. And down here you'll say, in cases where a definite diagnosis of COVID-19 cannot be made but is suspected or likely, e.g. the circumstances are compelling and within a reasonable degree of certainty, it is acceptable to report COVID-19 on a death certificate as probable or presumed. In these instances, certifiers should use their best clinical judgment in determining if a COVID-19 infection was likely. So it basically says that a death can be recorded as a COVID-19 death without an actual confirmed test. Hopefully they're doing their best. I mean, that's what we'd all like to believe. But I'm just pointing out that it does actually, this is the official guidance, that they don't actually have to confirm a COVID-19 to call it a COVID-19. Another point I'd like to make is that the symptoms of COVID-19 are like the symptoms for all kinds of things, right? Fever, chills, cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, fatigue, muscle body aches, headache, loss of taste and smell, sore throat, congestion or runny nose, nausea or vomiting, diarrhea. This could be the symptoms for all kinds of things. And so people might have these symptoms. People get sick all the time for various things, whether it be cold, flu, bacterial infections, respiratory infections. But these are not like super specific symptoms of anything. And just to point out here, the CDC, right, we're still in CDC, is it possible to have the flu and COVID-19 at the same time? Yes, it is possible to test positive for flu as well as other respiratory infections and COVID-19 at the same time, right? So these things can all happen. This is related to antibody tests, but just also pointing out that the CDC specifically says that if you have a positive test result, this is an antibody test for infection, the virus causes COVID-19. However, there's a chance that a positive test result could mean that you have antibodies from an infection with a virus from the same family of coronaviruses, such as one that causes common cold. So, kind of admitting that the antibody tests, like just there are different varieties of coronavirus, they're very common, and that just having a positive antibody test doesn't mean you have COVID-19. What else we got here? Also, just another thing to point out about these numbers that get thrown over here, the number of positive tests in a state is not equal to the number of cases, as one person may be tested more than once. And that can kind of just skew the data, right? Because if they test positive more than once, that's going to go with the positive tests, but may not necessarily be the cases, or maybe it will be, because this is the CDC and this is not state by state point. But anyway, kind of to try to wrap this up, why do I think that maybe potentially COVID-19 is not a real thing? The fact is that there just isn't really that much death for what you would expect to be something to be really concerned about, right? In Allegheny County, this is what you should expect, right, per month. This is what's being classified as COVID per month, actually. This is what could be extrapolated per month, applying these numbers to the entire population. However, that's not a super accurate thing to do, but not an unreasonable thing to do either. And then I question the validity of testing, right? Like, these tests that they have are not well tested. Like, I pulled up here, these confirmed cases of influenza, right? The influenza type testing has been around for a long time, and it's been refined, and it's been probably about as good as it's going to get, right? COVID testing is a very new thing, and there's just not a lot of data to show that are the tests that are being administered, are they reliable? Are there, nobody knows what the false positive rate, like these influenza types, I didn't bother to go look it up, but I have in other previous reading read, these things have a sort of a guess, an estimated based on studies of these tests over the years, they have a certain percentage of false positive rate. Now, for these, it's really low because these have been refined and developed over time. With COVID-19 testing, that's just an unknown. And, to the specific individual I'm making this for, I would point out, you probably know of people who, they've had flu-like symptoms and they go get a test. Sometimes they come back positive, sometimes they come back negative. Maybe people just have mild cold-like symptoms and they go get a test. And sometimes they come back positive and sometimes they come back negative. And sometimes people get tested when they have no symptoms at all for whatever their reasons are. And sometimes people have no symptoms, come back positive, and sometimes they come back negative. And so I don't think it's out of reason to question, is this testing process accurate? Or as I like to say, is the testing process almost just a random number generator? Is asymptomatic carrier, is that just another way of saying this is just a false positive? These are things we don't know, and I don't want to get too speculative with data, because I promised the guy I'm in this discussion with that I would try to keep it as free from speculation or anecdotal stories, and certainly free of any news reports. But so just looking at this data, right? Like, what is the actual threat, right? Right now, we've got 51 people dead per month on average out of 1.2 million people. This just doesn't seem like a threat. Now, you can make the argument that, well, all the precautionary measures have made this, think about how much higher this number could have been. Well, I'll admit that could be true, but the fact is we don't know. And I don't know about you, but when I've gone out in my local area, there's not a lot of people really taking precautions. I mean, you see some, but it's not like we're all huddled indoors worried. And I don't, and now, so then the other argument is let's say, like, if this number was, say, the actual number. What if this had been like 1,000 per month? That would probably seem legitimately more scary, and I don't think, there wouldn't be as much reason to argue that, is this even a serious threat? Well, 1,000 people a month. But even 1,000 people per month is not that many out of 1.2 million. But anyway, I digress. The point being is, this is the actual number. This is a estimated number based on the data we have. This is historical number of how many people just die for whatever numerous and varied reasons. And so I'm going to wrap this up. And that, as far as Allegheny County, Pennsylvania is concerned, is why I'm just questioning, is COVID-19 a real thing? Is it really something? Has it been worth all the things that the people have been put through? So Nick, you random Nick out there in the world that I'm talking to, your turn.